I first want to just introduce the topic and the things that we're going to be talking about today. So, specifically, the focus of the conversation today is all around data quality tips and tricks, specifically aimed at revenue operations for how you can essentially make yourself and your company AI ready. And so, the kind of thought process behind this topic was that AI is again is and has been, I think, front of mind for everyone. At Dreamforce, it was one of the major themes, and actually Ernie and Maschal did a shorter, more condensed version of this session at Dreamforce. This past year was actually the most attended session at the event, so a very popular thing that is on people's mind. And it makes sense because garbage in, garbage out. I think we've all been familiar with that as a revenue operator, but especially in the age of AI, most folks I think agree that data quality is a key part of any AI strategy and being successful. And I've got a couple of experts with me today that know a whole lot more about this than I do. So, going to introduce them quick, and then we'll dive into the topic and the content. So, I have Ernesto Valdes, or Ernie, who is the CTO over at Traction Complete. Ernie knows a whole lot about all things AI, Salesforce, machine learning, and development. And I also have Maschal Malek, who is a product owner of go-to-market systems over at Asana. And Maschal is, I don't know, I'll call her a Salesforce expert, more certifications in Salesforce than, I don't know, I might have fingers and toes. I don't know. I'll let her tell me how many she has specifically, but a lot of background in business systems, Salesforce, and sales operations. We're going to be diving into some specific tips, examples. So, Ernie, I'll turn it over to you to start to dive into the content. And then, just so everyone knows, I'm going to be launching a poll here shortly. So, answer away. And as we are collecting answers and before I show the results, I'll just ask maybe Ernie, what do you think? What do you think the most popular answer will be?
Well, I'm biased. I mean,
Uh,
the topic of our presentation is preparing your data to be ready for AI. I think the biggest reason is bad data that's not ready.
yeah. Michelle, you agree or what? And if you agree, maybe what would be your second?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think bad data is going to be probably what most people pick. But aside from that, I would probably say inefficient systems and processes.
All right. I'll end the poll right now. And I think probably not surprising, the bad data is top of the list. Yep. But actually I think the second one's interesting, right? The lack of education and training, which makes a lot of sense. I think a lot, and maybe one of the reasons why a lot of people are here today is we know there's all this technology that's out there. It can do a whole lot for us, but one, we don't necessarily know what it can all do. And then even when I'll say like when it does it or it does stuff, it's how did it do that? Is it missing anything? So there's like just a lot of questions, I think, at least for me, that kind of pop
The
up with
other
it.
problem is everything is constantly changing right now. So what you knew 6 months ago might not be relevant anymore, or it might be obsolete. So yeah, that's a
I
pretty big
mean,
one.
with the lack of education and stuff there, like that totally makes sense because it's one thing to know that AI is out there and exists and that there are tools there, but to truly be able to build it yourself for your systems, I think people don't really know where to start and how to get to where they want to get to and how many tools are involved there.
Yeah, it can be pretty daunting. So I see here that bad data won with 54%, and that's pretty close. Because one of the biggest problems that, according to McKinsey, that 56% of companies say inaccuracy is the biggest risk that they face when adopting generative AI. And we mentioned it before. Matt mentioned garbage in, garbage out is the common saying. But this is a pattern that I've seen over the last year as companies get very hyped and they go to Dreamforce or they go to some other AI presentation, and then they want to implement all of these amazing initiatives only to find out that actually their system has grown over time with acquisitions, with purchases of new tools, with different practices across teams, and it's just a big mess. And therefore they get frustrated and then they find that they actually can't execute. So what we would like to talk to you about today is really give you some preemptive tips to get ahead of that. The goal is for you to have a process to prepare your data to be read, understood, and actually be usable for fueling your AI tools to avoid that disappointment that so many companies are going through these days. So to start, I'm going to hand it over to Maschal. Hi, Maschal, to talk to us about her AI pilot at Asana.
Yeah, Ernie, thanks. So at Asana, we're very focused on AI right now, not only for our tool for our customers, but internally for our revenue teams. How can we make our sales reps' lives easier? So right now, we're actually doing a pilot where we have live right now a competitive intelligence AI in Salesforce. We also have pre-call planning in Salesforce that we've built, and we're working on building out post-call planning, which should be out soon, account planning, and customer churn prediction. So these are all being built internally through our own systems, and I'm going to be telling you guys more about this throughout our conversation today. So that brings me to tip number one is start small, pilot, and validate. It's really exciting to see AI pop up everywhere. And I think a lot of people get super excited because there are so many different tools that can do AI for you, but people have limited resources when it comes to budget, when it comes to the number of people who understand the tools well enough to be able to work on them. And a lot of times you also want to try to make homegrown solutions like we are here at Asana. And so it's good to make sure that the tools are going to work for your sales reps, that your reps are going to actually adopt, that the information that AI is going to be providing to your reps are going to be correct. And so with the competitive intelligence bot, we initially had launched this in Slack to provide instant competitor insights for our reps. So we had a Slack channel that was connected to our information in a Google Drive where we have our competitor intelligence information constantly updated through one of the teams within our company. And so when any reps went into this Slack channel, they would type in what's the difference between Asana and Monday.com, or they would get very specific with what's the difference in pricing or features, etc. And this bot would respond right away. So we found a lot of reps were using this and finding this super useful, but they wanted it in Salesforce. So we transitioned this into Salesforce. We're now in an opportunity when a rep puts in a primary competitor on the opportunity, right away, we're going to give you insights on the competitive intelligence. And it's still getting pulled from the Google Drive, but we're now using like an iPaaS system, Workato, to connect the two together. So that's instantaneous at this point, and we leverage ChatGPT to actually write the information into there. And then the other one was pre-call planning. So this is really exciting because when a rep has an event coming up, within 48 hours of that event coming up, we have auto-generated a pre-call plan where essentially it's going to tell you, okay, here are the desired outcomes for this call. Here are the people who are attending and some information on them. Here are suggested questions based off of where you're at in your opportunity. And I was doing a deep dive on how we built this the other day, and I was really mind blown because it's really pulling in information from the account, all the opportunities, any conversations like emails that we've had with that potential customer in the past. And it's pushing that data through Workato into Asana, where we have our own AI features that we are selling to our customers. And it basically, we have the prompting set up in Asana in a project. So this information all gets passed to there. We have prompting set up that tells us, okay, take all this information from Salesforce now, pull it together, give us information for a pre-call sales plan, and then it pushes us back to Salesforce via Workato to an object that we've created that's connected to that event. So it's really cool to see that everything is laid out for the rep before the call.
That's super amazing.
Hey, Michelle, I have I guess one comment and then one question. I guess as you were walking through this, the thing I loved about the competitive intelligence bot that you all built was, I'll say sequential steps that you took to get there today. You didn't start with, hey, let's do something complex and throw it into Salesforce as the V1. You have it here, like you use existing tools like ChatGPT, a Google Drive folder, your iPass, right? And it was like something that you pushed into Slack. And then when you found that it was working and people were leveraging it, you took the logical next step. So I think with any of this stuff, like that's a great way to approach it is ask yourself, hey, if I wanted to build this by the end of the day, what would I need? What would I need to do as a starting point? And then I guess one other question, and I don't know if this is the right spot or maybe if you're going to hit on this later, but Steve brought up something in the chat about a problem that he runs into is that these different AI engines, at least the ones that are embedded in products. I mean, you mentioned like Asana AI, but like other kind of product AI engines is they want their own kind of CMS. So like Einstein wants their own intercom with Finn wants their own. So whether it's here or maybe as we get to some other stuff, like just talk a little bit about how you think about building your own AI capabilities internally versus what you should leverage within products, and maybe how folks like Steve and others should think about that in terms of like where these different AI engines are pulling data from and how they're doing it.
Yeah, that question is really relevant. And it's funny because prior to working at Asana, I worked at Intercom and I was there when Fin was created and went live. It totally makes sense that like a lot of these tools that you buy want you to store the data in their own content management systems. It's because of the way that they're built. They're trying to make it so that it's easy for any customer to just put their information in there and to be able to pull from there because not every customer will be using Google Drive for containing their data. Not every customer uses Salesforce. So it's really easy for these companies to build their own CMS and have us put that data in there. But then when you have multiple of these AI tools, that's when it could get difficult on the RevOps side where you're like, okay, I need this data here. Like I need it in 10 different places. It gets a little difficult there. And that's why we're trying to build our own internally because it's just easier for us to decide where is that data coming from.
Yeah, that can seem pretty daunting. That leaves us to the next step, which is to identify and connect that metadata that you care about. And this means mapping your fields and objects. That's what metadata means. Metadata is just the objects and fields in which your data lives. To be more technical, it's like tables and columns. And what you want to do is actually identify across your different systems what is that data that you care about and where does it live to connect it all into a big data lake of your choosing. So what does that look like? It looks like we recommend doing an exploratory exercise. Like Maschal was saying, you don't just pilot your AI program. You want to really look at what is ready for that pilot and what is ready to be actionable today. So you do an exploratory exercise where you identify what is the data that you care about, in which systems does that data live, and then you actually evaluate that data for fitness. You ask across these systems, is it populated? How often is it actually populated? When it is populated, is it up to date? Or how often does it become stale or out of date? Or how often is it just inaccurate? You might find as you do this, by the way, that especially if you have a large organization with lots of different teams, that different teams might have different data population habits. One quote that I have in my head from an analyst from a year ago is, which of these three different price fields actually has the price? Because they found out that different teams across the organization had actually created price fields in Salesforce for their own processes. They had not talked to each other. And so you actually had to figure out, depending on the use case, which price field you actually want to look into. And so that's something that you really want to do, this exploratory exercise, in order for you to discover that ahead of time. And then another thing that you'll want to do after you've assessed the quality of that data and therefore the trustworthiness of each of those data points and systems is you'll be ready to resolve conflicts, because you might also encounter that different systems will have competing points of data. If you have two order tracking systems, they might give you different reports about the status of an order or a delivery. Or if you have different systems that give you competing data about prices, like I said, or discounts, you need to decide which one's going to win. when they have this competing information.
Yeah, Ernie, this is super, super relevant to how we built our bots because we specify, like, even though we're pulling all this for the pre-call stuff, for example, even though we're pulling all this data from Salesforce, we specified which fields we want pulled into Asana to build those blocks. We also, it's like our content library where we have our competitive intelligence. We have a team that's constantly updating the data within that folder. So it's not stale data there. So it's really important for that metadata to be up to date, I would say, and accurate.
Yeah, and the outcome of this exercise should be that you identify the data that is trustworthy and ready for some AI pilot today, and then you identify the data that perhaps you wanted to be ready, but you discovered was not, and then you look at the gap. What do we need to do to get that data to readiness, which is what Maschal was talking about here.
So our next tip is ensure you have reliable enrichment data. It's so easy to just sign up for a tool, let's say ZoomInfo, and try to trust that the data in there is accurate. It's another thing to be able to sit there and say, hey, this data may be accurate for certain locations, but not others. For example, for us, we found that, ZoomInfo does really well for account data. We also found that it does well for person data, but mostly in the AMER region versus EMEA or APAC regions. And what we found was that we need to get additional data providers. And on top of it, it costs a lot to enrich every single person in your system, every single company. So we had to find not only data providers that did well in the different areas that our prospects are located, we also had to make sure that it was cost effective. And so what we decided to do is we have Clearbit as our primary vendor because we got lucky enough to get grandfathered into an unlimited credit plan. And so we run everything through Clearbit first. And if that data is there, great, then we're good to go. But if the data for Clearbit shows us that person is in the APAC or EMEA region, we then send it to Cognism because we found that the data in Cognism is more accurate for those regions. We ran some pilots there and we just found that people were a lot happier with like phone number information from there. So if the data is not in Clearbit, then we go on to ZoomInfo, which if the data is there, again, it's going to get enriched. And if we see that the enriched data says it's an APAC or EMEA, again, it gets sent to Cognism. And our last line is if it's not in Clearbit or ZoomInfo, then it's going to go directly to Cognism for enrichment. So this is all based off of cost for us. This is all based off of location. And we do it differently for prospects versus accounts as well. So it's just really important that you test the data that's in there, get feedback from your reps, make sure that the accuracy for like phone numbers is there, make sure that the fill rates are good enough for what you're looking for. Because like our enrichment is really high. I think we're at 76% of our records are enriched in Salesforce. However, we still got complaints that like, hey, this data's not good. So it was really important for us to figure out, okay, we need to add Cognism in APAC and EMEA regions. We're still struggling a little bit in APAC, to be honest. So if anyone has any recommendations there, please let me know.
Awesome. So far, we've talked about connecting your systems by identifying the metadata that you care about and then enriching that data with different data providers. And what this will allow you to do is tip number 4, which is to enhance the automated data cleanup that you want to do to reduce noise in your CRM. And what do we mean by noise here? Noise is basically any data that gets in the way of you understanding who your customer is and what is your relationship and history with them. So there's 2, broadly speaking, approaches for how you can remove that noise. One is the proactive automated approach, brushing your teeth. And then the other one is reactive or manual approach, which is like going to the dentist. And obviously, the more often you brush your teeth, the more you can avoid going to the dentist and the less painful those visits will be. So we recommend that you start by setting up duplicate rules to dedupe your leads, contacts, and accounts upon creation, and that you create a set of cascading match rules from strict, meaning high confidence matches, to broad, meaning low confidence matches. An example of a strict match might be first name, last name, email. right? That identifies a person clearly versus an example of a low confidence match might be something like last name and address, which identifies a household but doesn't make it clear who that person might be. And you want to automatically merge your strict matches, and you want to then flag the other ones for review. So what does that look like? One thing that happens is manual review gets more and more expensive the more and more data that you have. Like, it's time consuming, it's complicated. So just like brushing your teeth, frequently you also want to set up recurring visits to the dentist. So you'll want to set up a cadence for you to manually review records that didn't have a high confidence match, and do that either daily or weekly or monthly, depending on the data volumes that you're dealing with, which will depend on your company. And on that monthly cadence, what you want to make sure you do is customize, and actually this is also the case for automatic deduping, customize survivorship and field retention rules. Specifically pay attention to when you merge records, which one is going to be the winning record and which ones are going to get deleted. And you might want to choose the winning record as the one that has the most activity, the one that most people are using, or the one that is a point of integration with other systems. So other systems actually depend on that record or its ID for integrations. And then zooming on the field level, when you merge records, you want to pay close attention to data retention rules. And there's different tools like Complete Clean to help you to do this, because specifically things like Castle Law or CCPR or GDPR in Canada, all these data privacy laws demand that if a customer has told you, don't contact me, or they don't call me, I've unsubscribed from your marketing communications, you really want to remember that and respect that so you can stay compliant. And as you're merging records, if you have several duplicate contacts and that data only lives in one of those contacts and it gets deleted, you want to make sure that you actually copy that onto the survivor. So we talked about mapping the data, enriching it so you get better matching, and then being proactive when it comes to deduplicating that data so that your AI tools can have a better system to work with. So part of that is normalizing. You really want to normalize your data proactively so that then you can dedupe it proactively. And this means by normalize, we're talking about standardizing the data that you're going to be using for matching so that you get better qualities when you're matching. Things that you might want to do here are standardize and identify commonly used values across your system, things like your brands or product names or commonly used industries. A really obvious one is state and country pick lists. And you want to put those into pick lists to avoid typos and errors that people might use when they're typing in forms. And you want to ideally create anomaly alerts so that you can identify if things that are outside that standard are being populated in your forms or leads. And so breaking it down, these are some of the broadly speaking ways that you can normalize data. We talked about category pick lists. So you want to standardize product names, industries, intent, but you want to also validate addresses. People type in addresses into forms in all sorts of different ways. And even though it's the same address, street might not match ST or etc. So if you use an address validation service that matches that address and then gives you back a standard format, now you have a much higher chance of matching those addresses to each other. And then a really obvious one when you're normalizing company names is to remove common prefixes or suffixes like LTD or Inc. that might get in the way of matching, and then pay attention to acronyms. For example, is USF, University of South Florida, or is it University of San Francisco? The address validation might get you that. And then an enrichment tool might actually help you to identify what is the actual name of the company. But you also might want to set up a acronym translation or dictionary where you actually take something like GMC and translate it into General Motors or General Motors Company and standardize that into General Motors. So you want to pay attention to acronyms and common prefixes and suffixes when you're doing this. So I'll pass it over to Maschal.
Yeah, so our next tip is create a shared data dictionary. It can get really tough when you're working across different systems and the data is all the same there, but the field names are different. For us, we've faced this difficulty when using a tool called Pocus for prospecting. We're pulling data in from Snowflake, we're pulling in data from Salesforce, we're pulling in data from LinkedIn, and the names of those fields are different in each of those systems. And we're combining that data into Pocus. So we're saying like, hey, bring me the account SASE 7 information from Salesforce and also bring it in from Snowflake and combine it to show me a unified view of this field. However, our reps are used to the fields being called whatever it is in Salesforce. So when they're looking to add fields to their list views, when we're looking ourselves to create filters for playbooks in POCUS, we'll run into this issue of, wait, which field is it? What is it called? And so we decided to create a data dictionary ourselves in Asana. I started in a spreadsheet, Google Sheets, and then I ended up going and moving that over to Asana just because I work there. And so what we did was we pulled in every single field name from POCUS, and then we put what is the source that this data is coming from? Is it Snowflake, Salesforce? Is it both places? Or is it even Marketo? And then when you actually click into any of these, it gives you the definition of the field. It gives you the name of the field in Salesforce or Snowflake or Marketo and what we're calling it within POCUS. So our reps can not only see what the name of the field is related to what they're used to seeing, but also what's the definition of that field, because we're not bringing in every single field from all of those sources. We're just bringing in what's important. So sometimes they're like, oh, what is the importance of this field? And we'll provide that information there.
How long did this data dictionary exercise take? Did you find that?
Oh, it took a long time. It was priority for a few months, and it's just really hard, I think, in general, to create something like this because you have so many other priorities that you're like, oh, a data dictionary is not that important. But then when you see how many questions we're fielding from our reps on the daily basis of what does this mean, we realized, okay, we got to hurry up and build this. So thankfully with POCUS, you can export all the fields really easily. So we already had an export of all the fields we're using, but it took us a while to go in and actually put in what were the data sources, what's the field name in Salesforce. That's a lot of having to pull lists from Salesforce and see, okay, which field relates, because we even forgot. And then being able to provide definitions for every field is probably the hardest part because that might exist in Salesforce, but it probably doesn't exist in Snowflake. It probably doesn't exist in Marketo. So we sort of had to think of those on our own. And it did take a few months to get there, and we're still building it. We have to update it on a daily basis because we're adding more fields into POCUS. We're deleting fields in POCUS. We don't want to have too much data in there if it's not relevant. So it's an ongoing thing to clean it up and keep it updated.
Nice. But it delivers the value. It answers the questions.
Yeah. And our reps love that now it's in Asana because they work out of Asana all the time. And so it's a lot easier for us. We have it broken down by user fields, prospect fields, account fields, entity fields, so they could see based off of the object within POCUS, what fields are there.
Amazing. So moving on to the next tip.
Matching leads to related records. This is a lot like what Ernie was saying about deduplication and normalization. Matching leads to your records is so important. We actually use Traction Complete for this so that when our leads are coming in, typically Salesforce doesn't connect your leads to an account. And so you could end up with duplicates where there's a contact and there's a lead, and then you have to go through that deduping process when you're converting the lead. With Traction Complete, we're able to identify what accounts our leads are tied to based off of multiple different criteria that we've set. It's critical for maintaining our Salesforce cleanliness. It is helping with a unified view of what we have connected to accounts. So if I go into an account, I could see not only the contacts that we have available there, I can also see the leads that we have available there. And it also helps to make sure that we're not having duplicate leads either, matching leads to existing leads as well, because we're able to pull in that account data. So if a person has the same name as another person, you can't always assume that it is the same person, but when we have the account data, that helps so much more with deduping. So what are the risks when you don't do this? Leads not matched properly can create data silos, inconsistencies. It could cause a lot of fragmented data. So this all hampers your AI performance. If you're trying to figure out, okay, pre-call data, Who are we talking to? And not only that, who have we talked to in the past? What emails have we sent? We want to make sure that all that data can be pulled in through the account. And if we don't have our leads connected, that's not going to be possible. And then tools like Salesforce Einstein require a comprehensive and unified view. So it's funny that Salesforce doesn't already do that automatically.
Typical Salesforce.
Yeah. So on the next slide, you guys will see how we have this set up ourselves within Traction Complete. Asia Howard is actually one of our employees, so I'm just going to use her as an example. But we have Asia Howard, who is a lead that comes in, and we're able to find the company through the data in Traction Complete using the filters that we have on the left-hand side and the bottom for matching. And we're able to then connect them to the account. So that account is actually a lookup that we can click through to. And then it's a parent-child object there. So it's going to be able to pull all the information into the account itself. So like we look at the company name, we look at, or the company name that the person gave us. We look at the record type. We look at the total number of seats. Like this is, okay, if there are multiple accounts that could match, how are we going to make sure it's the right account? So we're looking at, okay, which one do we have more opportunities open with? Which one is not connected to a bot and a sales rep is actually like reaching out to those accounts and such. There are just so many different things that you want to do to ensure that not only are they matched to a company, but it's the right company that they're matched to.
Yeah, there's so much complexity in the object to object stuff that isn't like to anyone first thinking about it, you're like, oh, it can't be that hard. You got people and you got companies, but it's, I wish it was that easy. You talk about these big global companies who might have legal entities all over the place, and maybe you have different accounts for each of those entities. So like SAP is not just one account in your CRM. They're hundreds. And then, like you said, you get all these people working for these larger companies as well. And you run into things where people could literally have the same name, right? But a different email address and a different job title because they're actually different people. So there's a lot of complexity in the object to object matching that doesn't necessarily appear at first sight.
Yeah. And to recap where we're at, you've mapped your fields, you've connected them, you've enriched your records, you've normalized the data, you've matched it, and now you have your leads connected to your matched accounts. Then you want to zoom out a little bit here and make sure that you connect related accounts to each other according to their legal family tree of companies in order to build a full context of who your customer actually is. And those data sources that Maschal was talking about are going to be useful here. And you read those data sources and you use tools like complete hierarchies to connect accounts to each other directly in Salesforce. So what does that allow you to do? Well, if, for example, where Hulu fits into the Walt Disney hierarchy of companies, then you can look up at parent accounts and you can see whether or not you have existing contracts, SLAs, discounts that you want to respect with that parent company. Or you might find that you already have gone through procurement with that parent company, and that actually really helps you when you're going through procurement with the child company because you've already been validated as a vendor. Looking sideways at siblings, you can look for cross-sell or upsell opportunities. For example, if you sell to YMCA, there's a lot of YMCA, so the chances that if you've sold them a product and it worked for them are pretty high that you're also going to be able to sell to the other YMCAs. Now, with the case of YMCA, it's pretty obvious that they are siblings because they have the same name, but that might not always be as obvious. So looking here, you might not know that Hulu is actually a sibling of Marvel Studios. So if you sold them tickets to the baseball game for their holiday party, it might be a really nice reference to sell them to Marvel Studios as well. And then looking in the hierarchies downward, you can look at subsidiaries. And similarly here, AI tools like Einstein Prompt Builder can help you to craft a much better introduction email if you know that you already have relationships with a subsidiary, that you have contacts that you know there, that you have open or closed deals that you've already signed with them. And that can be the difference between that AI-generated email feeling a lot more like a cold open without any references to your existing relationships, or automatically pulling in all of that data from parents, siblings, or subsidiary accounts that you've actually connected and automatically crafting a much better and warmer introduction email. And so let's keep zooming out. We've talked about how we connect accounts to each other based on how they relate to each other as legal entities. That gives you a better picture of your customer. But we also want to connect accounts to their sales territories so that you can get a clear picture of how you go to market internally, how you organize your sales teams, and so that you can drive reporting not just at the opportunity or account level, but at the level of your territory. And so what you want to do here is look backwards to identify existing patterns that are associated with success or associated with stalled deals or lost opportunities, and identify what those patterns are and what is their connection to close won ops or close lost ops, to see like how much of a role do they play. And after you look back and identify those patterns, then you can use them as key performance indicator, like leading indicators, to look forward at your existing territories against your go-to-market plans, your sales targets, and identify red flags. If things are, some patterns are, for example, red lines in legal contracts, like how many red lines are going in a legal contract, you can flag that automatically with an LLM by reading through the legal contracts and marketing on opportunity records. And then you can flag the territories themselves as potentially being at risk. And there's also positive patterns like talk tracks that really work well, or whether opportunities have a next step. So one pattern that you'll see here as you look back and forward is that you'll want to use LLMs to take all of this unstructured data and structure it into key insights that you care about. So phone conversations, emails, etc., that might be associated with your sales. You can use LLMs to extract structured data that then you can put into that territory structure and then create a health indicator of how you're doing against your sales targets.
And Ernie, any advice for people on how to approach this, I guess, this challenge or maybe this capability? Because like the point you just brought up about like red lines, right? I've never like most deals that I've ever worked on have involved some sort of redlining or legal review, but that has never popped into my head as a potential data point that I could extract and now like leverage against all the opportunities until you literally just said it. So how can people like any framework or like best practices or tips of like how people can think about those things that again maybe they don't have access to or have never thought of as having access to today, but are very doable with AI and the new technology that's out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two themes that come out in my head for the answer. One is pilot, start small, and validate. Do discovery. You don't know ahead of time exactly what will work for you.
Yeah.
So there is this exercise in discovering. And then the other one more broadly in the industry is this pattern of taking LLMs to look at unstructured data, like tons and tons of phone conversations, transcripts, emails, or a big legal contract, which would typically be pretty cost prohibitive to look at scale, but the LLMs can do it so quickly. So take the LLM power to look through unstructured data and then extract from that little bits like bullet points of structure that then you can actually integrate into your system of record. Maschal?
Yeah, that's exactly what we do with call data before the next call. So we look at our transcripts that we're pulling from Chorus into Salesforce, and we're having that data pushed into Asana, and that we have our prompt builder, and within it, we state that we wanted to look through the transcript as one of the things that it should go through and let us know what were the important parts of the previous call. So yeah, that's stuff that we couldn't do ourselves without the LLM.
Yeah.
We do that
Yeah,
in
that makes
Product as
sense.
well. We have all of our phone conversations and every opportunity summarized by ChatGPT, and we extract key pieces of data like, was there a clear next step? Because if there isn't, then we know that deals can stall. Which products did we mention, right? Which pain points? And can you categorize them into this standard set of pick list values? And then we can use that and ask the LLM to format it in a clear way that then we can actually put on the records themselves. And then that allows us to report at scale on those red flags or issues that you want to use as key leading indicators.
And
Yeah.
also it's important to note that every LLM provides that output a little bit differently. So we found like for competitive intelligence, ChatGPT works well, but for our pre-call planning, Claude works well for us. There's a difference there too.
Yeah. And it makes sense. I think the key is in the discovery and, the fact, right? You don't know what you don't know. So embrace that. Don't expect that you're going to come to the table with the answers and be able to go straight to the solution, but come to the table with problems, interviews, dive deep, do the research, right? To get to that good starting point and then learn from there. So makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a waterfall approach. It's a process of continuous discovery, particularly in the coming years where all of these tools are still emerging, still coming into place. So we set up a Slack channel where all of the conversations and the summaries are posted and people can actually follow up and ask the LLM for extra info. And that's there permanently. And then people explore what kinds of answers they get about different questions. And then from there, we can mine for useful ideas that we can actually add to our automations.
All right, so we're on to our last tip, and this is defining measures of success. You can't do an AI pilot without setting some sort of measures of success to see how it works out. We're not going to know if it's successful or not if we don't get the feedback, if we don't run some reports for it, and if we don't align with our teams. We not only need to align with the revenue technology team that I'm on, I also need to align with the revenue operations team. I need to align with multiple other teams that are touching our bots to make sure that we all agree on this is what is important to see. We want to see the accuracy of predictions. We want to see the impact on the sales cycle timelines. Is that pre-called planning really going to provide reps with time saved before their calls? The ROI from the AI-driven insights is obviously also important. Like, is it going to give us more money? Are we closing more deals? So next slide is about the key measures of success for AI pilots for us. We selected some metrics that directly align with our business goals and RevOps strategies. So we're going to be looking at accuracy of the predictions, the impact on sales cycle times, like I said, and the ROI there. But we're also going to be looking at adoption rates. Are reps actually going and using them? And this is also a education thing. Are we giving them enough training to understand that this exists and that they could be using it in these ways? And are they using it appropriately? We also need to look into system performance. Obviously, for Salesforce, you have a limit on API calls. So is that going to impact us there? Is it also going to impact us within like ChatGPT or Claude? Is it going to impact us on the Asana side and Workato with how many recipes we're having to build in order to support this? Is it going to mess up performance in any way there? And then lastly, data integrity. Are the insights that we're getting provided valuable? Are they accurate? Are they actionable? We can't really trust that everything AI is going to spit out for us right now is 100% correct as much as we want to. So we got to sit there and go through those call prediction logs. We got to go through the competitive intelligence sometimes and make sure that the data that our reps are getting are accurate. And so we already talked about aligning across teams. We want to make sure that everyone is working towards the same goal and is using the same metrics so that if anyone has questions about our metrics, they know where to go and we're all looking at the same dashboards. We also want to make sure that these measures of success help us build the roadmap for the future and help us build a roadmap for achieving those goals. It's working backwards in order to get to where you need to be. And we need to make sure that it ensures that the data initiatives are driving meaningful results at the end of the day and contributing to our business in some sort of way, because what's the point if it's not going to drive business for us and save reps some time?
Yeah, you want to avoid that a failure in your initial AI implementation, because then how are you going to request extra budget to grow that AI implementation unless you can build on existing success?
Exactly. Because of these pilots, we've been able to get like the green flag for actually building an AI team, whereas before it was like individuals across different organizations at our company that just were very interested in working on this. And they all jumped in from their existing roles and were like, let me add this onto my plate. Now we can actually go and build a team to do this. So it's great because we have over 100 different use cases that we're looking to do. And we are only piloting on, I think, 6 total right now. So it's going to be great when we see everything else that we can build there.
Amazing. Okay, so let's bring it all together. What have we talked about today? We mentioned that the goal was to give you a process by which your data can become usable by your AI. So to summarize it, you want to make sure that you connect your systems to your data lake or to your system of record. You want to make sure to purchase different data enrichment providers. And Michelle talked about how to decide which one is best so that your records are enriched with data. And you want to normalize that data so that it gives you the highest possible match rates. And then that will allow you to both proactively and reactively or manually clean up your data to remove all of that noise so that your LLMs and your AI analytics can actually be valuable to you so you can trust your data. And then once that data is clean and normalized and enriched, then you can connect it using those matches or using your enrichment to create a clear picture of your customer and how they relate to each other, and actually to understand if they relate to each other, and then also to create a clear understanding of the patterns and trends internally that are either driving towards success or driving towards lost deals, and then use those as leading indicators of future success or as red flags for you to jump in when something might go astray. And that's how you can pretty much bring it all together to orchestrate your automations. So if you would like more of this content or you would want to dive in more specific use cases, look for an email from Traction Complete. We'll be sending you an email after this with some best practices. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is in the chat here, so add me and reach out, and I'd love to talk to you more about this.
Likewise, if anyone would like to get more information on the pilots we're running at Asana and how we decided to run those pilots or anything, feel free to reach out through LinkedIn, which is also in the chat.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ernie and Michelle, thank you very much for dropping some knowledge and I think a really tactical step-by-step guide on how any revenue operator can approach AI in the best way possible at their company. So thank you very much for that. To all the attendees out there, thank you for joining us. But that is all that I have for you. So again, Ernie, Michelle, and everyone out there, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you all at the next one on the flip side. All right. See you, everybody.